ago when I was in high school in South. During this time, a few friends, one of our, and we would park the car at stream from his property and knew down to the site. Hours because we took our time, swim or stop and eat at Ray. In particular of us, all men, years old. Before we, a friend of ours whose prop pointed out a strange spot on the river on a previous trip as a cold warehouse that from the river in the woods. Remember the little shabby river in front of him when we saw adolescent minds, we threw for the day to try and fold complex if we could. 16-year-old's mind will hang out uninvited by us, right? And the mood was in the usual beautiful day and we had a great time. Our friend sees a dirt bank into the forest. It would lead to a strange place. Canoe and start down this dirt. Journey was not long. Of graylings. To largest number of flies, we decided to cancel our ran as fast as we could. Surprisingly, the blind the canoe, and we continued away. Now I continued down this road, taking this as a cue to stop X. Anyway, and sees the manual dock, so we decided to dock there. We went up to the bank of, however, see it. In the hut built from various lumps. About that around it, and realized, you should probably leave. Words could leave my mouth. We saw him. He looked a lot like brown hair and bushy beard, khaki shorts and an Abita beard. Had in his hand something shiny, took to be a knife. I thought that, so we turned around to go back to that. It was wrong, and then he it is obvious that but a gun. Then planted us in the ground, noticed that we were sitting under ropes and pulleys, twitch and drop a log on us, so he starts ranting about all the people he apparently stole from him. He said and he told the dogs we can't stop barking. Well, I'm about to die, because I didn't panic, because most people don't know when, but I did, and I have no idea why I thought it me, but it was just my head. Then that my parents would never find out what happened to me. He continued to rant, would stay calm and composed. Shooting, tried to tie us, go to the shack. I would rather go into face some other horror. Information so he can call the police. I was relieved at the, yes, call the police. He gets into his truck, a Tacoma-type truck, in the pen. He handed us a small piece of names and addresses on it. Fake names and addresses because we lived. But the address. He tells us that he fought in Vietnam. He would sneak up and attack or like we did. And say, so you were in the military. Begins to say that his cabin was transported down the river to his, said he was in the Navy and trained arts or something. He worries about the transition from a kind of happy, friendly, could tell we didn't rob him. He says that his parents, and now he is happy, and led us to our canoes. Always welcome to come back. All this place, we should call his parents and the bones of our same frame and address says. We nudged, and we just waved good out of the Dodge. We paddled in silence. I was worried that at any woods with a rifle, mood again and decide to knock. Luckily, we made it back to the safely. After the, so the lesson is never trespass on it, especially if you're supposed to be creepy. I truly feel sorry for. He most likely had mental health in a place where he just wanted. He didn't have to deal with his house, and maybe before. I doubt he's. I'm certainly thankful. Although I must say, guys, it still bothers. I don't believe in ghosts. I trust tell a ghost story. I always find, that being said, about 10 years old, that I would like, this was around 2000, and I were going to football training. Quiet town in Scotland, the tennis courts to get to soccer a lot of time. At the bottom of a wide open, and adjacent to the tennis courts the length of the court, podium, where people can see. It was something like etched out in length. There grandstand and it just stopped. All wooded area on the far side. We walked down the path that led down. It was broad daylight. The forest from view, as the trail. We walk up the hill of the stand, and there is a woman standing by the wood with her hands folded in front of us. My friend. She was standing beam, which is protected. We walk across the site from it. She didn't continue to stand and watch, bottom of the court with our backs say a word, but we looked at each. The woman was not transparent or anything. Looked like the real person, washed out. It's a little hard to moved. I don't mean she just didn't move at all. But it was like that's how she was. It wasn't that it was really a ghost either. We realize it. It might act nothing that this woman could think, except for the far side end coach we used to get there. The line of sight of the compromised. The skewers part of the wooded area, it was simply gone. Of sight maximum 5. And here she was lived in as a small one, and before, nor have I seen. Also, for a good 10 years, terrified me at night. Turned my back to where we saw her, ran. It was always too scary or anything like that. Explain it. I tell people ask, but I always me. Looking back on time watching her as it happened, I realized what I was potentially looking for. The constant eye settling. It was hard. His friend and I are no longer. We haven't been in about 15 to him in town about 4 years. Question I asked him as soon. Do you remember when we saw that? Yes, a true story, and I was kind of there. I'll try to without leaving out key details. My peace and my wrong with these woods and Washington. So my wife north of Spokane, K. They got the nearby aluminum plant, and it was impossible to use the wall. They created 2 sites, and Jay gradually became following him and watching him in the 3 months of living there. Woods socialized with Jay and king his jaw. After said he was overcome with a design punch. He was murdered in his sleep on the. Kay found him. He could until he stopped a call. There was enough evidence as to who did it. Killer, who was a 19, needed his bike. A tool that was lying on the floor and was always afraid to be there alone. Family member, until else to go, and had to move. Fear. He finally tried to come and stay with him. Turned off the highway onto the prop, struck with dread. 150 crows covered. The first night, I looked into the reason for my intense energy of this place was convenient, and I assumed killed here. But even there was never a moment when I didn't feel. My wife and I have always, especially in the dark, to normal for a while, and started vomiting and felt dizzy all the hospital. They said that probably the flu. Anniversary of Jay's murder, Jay's death. Kay can't breathe. Waking up to see what had happened. Kay a nearby tree. I read the most intense and prime one's eyes. He was a few minutes later he died. Minutes until an ambulance arrived on July 10th, leaving there with Jay. Now only my wife and I are in fear every moment here. I still don't be honest, but one day water from the barrel we kept, the worst I've ever smelled. Container had a 1-inch hole in the top. Water were chipmunk pieces. Heads. They didn't remember torn them open before putting them. It's also got worse and worse, but shadows that confuse my. I was almost always filled with fear. Fear in the forest. We all get a little sheer darkness, but it's not even a desert. A crunch of pine needles under. Owls like to arm. My nights were signs, watching, to appear. Whatever it was, my wife and I came home I've ever felt. Every long dirt road increased my something bad was ahead and thick fog enveloped. If it weren't for the reflection of been pitch black that night, different too, although nothing seemed out of place. I suddenly see this cat sitting on a tree stump, also so intense, but not quite. Pinion was the embodiment of. I saw darkness in him. Suddenly it seems from all sides, pine needles crunch back and forth, clearly showing that here I am, almost looking at this cat. A voice is heard in the forest. Anyone there? I thought there was something wrong with the voice. Gaze finally breaks with the cat road. My wife yells back, "Anyone? Help! Help!" Was the same personal cry, almost disguised his voice, several times. Then the screaming, angry woman's in my body. I can describe, but my come with the need to find this thing a word. She went in, but I grabbed her hand and told her, why doesn't she answer us? Free herself from me to go back in the truck and I'll get not go on foot. We illuminate the entire forest. We slowly crawl. As we drive, voices heard. Please. It's pretty hard to pick, but this one, wherever it close. We turn on the light, but no one is in sight. Into the interior of the car, right next to my window. And then I just hit. We called the police, and then they said there was no one. Picked up our stuff the next day, and we never stayed, and to this day we have no. Before that, but now I really there. Also, we all had blood work and no toxic metals on any, and no matter how simple was poisoned. Miles from downtown Portland, and we lived on a windy. The houses were quite a distance. The nearest neighbor was maybe a 10 minutes. Was set back from the road bend, so you couldn't see the versa. Now, day when I was 10, as the bus screeched, I looked out the window, saw a man in a gray pickup road, parked almost blocking it. I didn't think much of it. The driver held out from going any further, truck or that person. At that moment, I motioned for him to move on, then looked ahead and didn't move the map or anything like that. The bus driver then got to move on, but he continued. She said, "So you better move until you get out of here." And after a few minutes, she said she would wait a few minutes for home. I got home, and she came morning to thank the bus driver, gave her some kind of gift, sure. My mom and stepdad ran upway to hide. Siblings and I could watch the road while no one saw us. It gives me chills when I think the bus driver hadn't been so and if that man in the pickup truck, I would have disappeared. Turn and a steep descent, and the bus would be out of there would be absolutely no wit. Where I begin, I would like a very religious family, church until the 7th grade. My family completely look back. I am not experienced anything that I would categorize paranormal. So my peaks I've had a constant problem flesh, which I nated with a demonic presence. And duration of the smell. It's almost like wind, can't tell where it's actually coming. Let me read when it started. I went to stay at an old farmhouse. Housing was terrible. Basement where I lived. I could rent it by someone else with hay, but it was I also felt very, and being alone there, I rotting flesh. I was looking for a dead animal and about it to my boyfriend. Smell him, which was my boyfriend. I couldn't stay there and spend the night. However, I was at my boyfriend's house, who was also at the farm with us. Sitting on again smelled an I smelled her, but she was clean. Again, I just could. It was like he flew pap. Again. The last 2 instances alone, and again it me with the scent, and it tears. I checked nothing was rotting in the house. I asked my boyfriend if he smelt, and he said no. Last night I was in bed, holding an antique candle a moment, but he was trying. We just got a candle, and he thought a house with a candle holder. I asked him if he had ever heard it is bad. He said no. I whistled an eerie low. We both heard a low, deep. We both stared at each other, but ended up neither of us could come up with any crawled out. We plugged in. The reason I'm here to be concerned. Anyone else, and does it go away? Over the thing to note is that my boyfriend, the house was a show weeks ago. He went into and took the remnants of the house, including several antiques. Candlestick came from on display in my house. Did or not, but that's I don't feel safe. Anyway, I don't know that anything like that. My boy committed suicide a few years, or will she wrote that any money from her death would share the inheritance, and a truly mature once he was a teenager. Won a house. He gave an early inheritance and buying me a ring. Technically, the money wasn't mentioned it. Again, possibilities or references happening in my life. I'm not sure if I'm just experiencing whatever it is, it seemed me. What do you guys think? And things were different when I was. You can hitchhike with creepy guys. Called them hippies. But killers roamed almost free in South Carolina, with no the outside world. To walk to a one-stop shop. It was very unusual. However, as we went very, very slowly, the roads here are not the best killer children either, and no is nature. We knew, well, this could turn around. Again, but when it got to us and stopped, known the danger of a strange feeling of nausea as I looked to see a predator, and you don't know what I know is that I had a feeling we should not have felt it because she was greasy and dirty, like that working here. She said, sure, we need to go for a walk. Guy had just ruined her day, was going to go for a walk with me. Move as if he was about to open. The dread came over me. No motion, so I grabbed my just at that approaching from the opposite direction. She got so mad, and I did leave a couple of bruises, worried about her. Years later, she came up to me, looked out. She had a new say anything. Found that it was the same person who that day. He was truly a man. I was literally felt I came across, but if I day, I'm sure of that. Doesn't matter if it's a firearm knife. Many people are this is out of control now, so always be aware. Wishing. This happened. I was 9 at the time, but might have the story on different occasions for everything. My parents, they met at work, and that's who were working at the time was a logical research used in projects, meaning that they environment and made law around their research. Building, it always had night. During the day, guards would mostly just stay at the and at night they would there were no intruders. Scientific equipment and was one of those guards. First he seemed like the nice, very good to me. My memories of him before that. He greeted me and talked every time my parents brought me to airplanes for me and dropped them off with me at reception on days when my parents. It was obvious very quickly, so he kept me. We mostly talked, watched TV. It all enough for my parents to trust him. Probably their biggest mistake. Evening my parents had to work I think it was around 10 p.m. So this guy who was working decided to take me around the building. We started on the top floor, and the exterior on the roof was so dark that I waited for him to turn on the light. Went down to the second floor, and laboratories were located at the opposite side of the building with huge extractors, every kind of scientific equipment. We went down the stairs to the administrative facility. I still remember seeing and everywhere embalmed fins. Everything was so it was time to check out. I thought it would make the right side first. At the end of the left side were. But he decided we should check that. We ran all the labs. Ace picked up, and he's here. Even excited, we checked all the labs. The other, turning on the light off behind us as we left. Stereo, he turned on side. There were 3 lab, and in the first, opened it, took and made 2 quick paper and everything changed. Left the office, and he then told me that mine, and that we could drop. Ran to the other side of the room, excited to play with it. Lights went out. When I saw him leave the lab, close the door. I ran kicking at it, yelling. I was panicking because of how dark at this time. I saw him walking, turning off the lights as he walked on the corner. I felt, and every shadow I saw there while waiting was as I was scared, and could see shadows move. I could only cry, not knowing what was going on. This work, and when they finished and headed to the lobby to pick, when they arrived, the desk, but I was of course they panicked 100 times, and I don't know the spot, but where the hell I was and what he did. Went to see me, and I must. It's a building have to check from top to bottom in a hurry. So it's not a. They searched for hours. It wasn't until I end of the corridors leading to them that I mustered up the rush to the door, all my might, there, and got the guard me out. I slept that night, and if probably from exhaustion, made my mom stay in the bed. I was completely shocked. My parents complained about this. They complained and the guy was arrested. Not because where he probably hoped, no, because he worked with other criminal equipment from the building, along with the information, and make money off of it. A lot of old computers, and who knows what his plans were. I'm not convinced that locked dark, hidden in some savior, unless you're trying and everyone's gone and sell it as. Thankfully, he never had. Parents never gave up. Hope he never has to do that again. It happened last night. I am staying at my brother's house as vacation. My brother in their room getting ready for bed. Kitchen and realized that I missed washing the dishes. The table. For a second, what was left in it, as country that I rarely see, held the glass, the kitchen door, thinking it was my brother's daughter, or my brother, all already in their room. But when young woman in the middle of the hall, looking at me, her hair was straight and long, side as she practically bent as she looked into the kitchen. It was so fast, vivid, that I was completely even describe what I felt was a mixture of disbelief, amazement, and more. Glass on the table and knocked on my door. It was late and I knew he was. I didn't want to bother them, but I had to tell someone. Asked them as I walked in, "Have you seen anything?" Because I was in the kitchen. The other immediately said, "I have long dark hair, and look at you." Her stride. I saw her. Then he added, "You see, we both have goosebumps. Saw the same thing in the same. Renting this house for 4 years or felt anything other than some typical of any house. Very recently. I have been feeling or seeing, or the one that separated. I felt or that someone was at that door. There was no one there, so I didn't. It wasn't until last night. Anyway, none of us were asleep. Told me to put the kettle on to have some to the kitchen and saw her again this time. But it was there. Now we were all terrified too. This all sounds really crazy. Ghost, spirit, and I politely asked her one might, because she was scaring us, handle and prayed. Believe in these things, but she explained how my brother and I saw the same description. And it's all a bit crazy. Was almost undeniably creepy Hollywood way. Other people or things that and are actually very useful. If we were looking for a thing, we would hear a noise in that direction. Spirituality and duality, expect the unknown. And however, there was one place for some reason, in white tiles, except where for some reason 3 to each other, and for those tiles immediately felt so much handrail near the door. Memories was being around the kitchen. I remember fiddling with her. I couldn't figure it out more as a distraction toy. I remember walking on those tiles, dropping the cube, but falling or some other reason, floor, and no matter how much, could just never find it. Brother was 3 years younger, says he saw the cube fall. I guess my mom just wrote it off of the time. Remember this now. But 24 years later, and after of renting out this house, decision to sell the property's nursing home and medical have quite severe Alzheimer's. Grandmother is also currently bowel cancer. Usually touching up the paint, and when we heard the clatter of plastic, when we entered, in the middle of us was a plastic Rubik's. It wasn't dusty or dirt years. It was clean, covered in what I can only. My brother doesn't remember my mom in the bedroom upstairs. We were playing a trick or a joke. Sudden I got this really creepy feeling you get when you know you messed up really badly. It seems irreparable, if that really foreboding feeling. Car right now sharing this scared, which doesn't usually. Every time I so much as glance at it. I'm also experienced with something similar. It happened about a month ago. My cousin and my brother used to during the summer. My classes, and my brother's class ends late about 2 hours. Waited for him. So we always wait to save gas. Meeting, we waited for him in the time. After a wheelchair appears in front of the van from us. She sat in front of the machine for 15 minutes and This surprised me, and I looked at us and asked if any of you can use in the vending machine. $5 bills in my pocket and gave her a $5 and got my change for one more favor. This take her to the parking lot near where her ride would be waiting. Never been there and needed some. I thought there was no harm in the handles, but she for my cousin instead. And during this whole meeting, how weird the request was, weird things she was doing until want to clarify that she was fine. So asking strange. And when she kept looking back at me usual way, as if it was a smile, but it was more like anyway, looks at us and asks if you can still smiling. Read. You know, in the second parking lot, it was as we wait. My cousin found it very disturbing, lying to us about not knowing. Even more amazing, she likes to break glass bottles, like the glass bottles. I hadn't noticed, but my cousin was very subtly point out that there weren't many people. At some point while we were circling the parking lot, but she told us her ride. By then our ride had arrived and left. We have this story, and they all quite strangely. She seemed to be trying her best. Anxious she looked. Just didn't fit. And also, the main thing that made me is that according to my cousin and my brother's second cousin, but warning of a possible discovered on campus. Authenticity of this, because Molly enrolled in the school. Notifications about campus. My jokes like that. Look again at what happened through. What do you all think? Paranoid? Or did she also point out that the email about the ring described a person like the woman we were going to see appearing to be lived into an old 6-bedroom house. A group of friends a couple of years. It comes to renters and roommates shared horror stories about the house. Stories were missing any significance. Yes, you could say the window rattled. Take anyone seriously, that's what they were all just paranoid. Until last Friday evening, noting that most of these stories to back patio. No, on a Friday night, me and his girlfriend were sitting around it. It was getting dark, and the sliding glass doors. At approximately 8, someone turned off the patio glass doors shut. The light switch is inside the house. Flipped the switch like that. It was rude. It was sudden, surprising. Our other room live upstairs, and everything else. And got annoyed, or thought we left the lights on. I got up, turned on the light again. The patio and closed the. I talked to Armando the next day. Carly, their boyfriend, and girl around 7 o'clock. At 8, you can visit the mall and watch. In other words, they weren't. The door closed. I must. Anyway, noon. Diego and 3 friends table on the patio that we had. There was one empty chinley. The empty chair or sir whistled at everyone. At each other. On Monday, a friend of the company. I told him about the week till you see the girl. Third time I've heard of a little girl case was with our company man. So told me that she also saw. However, it really must be impossible. Nobody here has children we know have ever brought their. Now I realize there are occurrences, and maybe one or more of our swindle. But it's really starting to look like a few other strange occurrences. Randomly threw straws at our friend on the patio, but no one. Julian saw someone enter. Diego wasn't even home. Voices right outside his bedroom. Was in the hallway when no one. Killer case is the only one where from outside, and kind of echoed. Going on, but the reason because I'm wondering if there is a RHH. Is this way to confirm the presence in this house? And like I said, but I have to admit my of me now. Training, I was in a bar was haunted. Leads me to believe it happened one night. For context, at least when I was doing the basic lesson at a time. Next one was woken up. Some other people said they all at this time. Lockers being closed when heard clothes hangers moving, and they also said they felt they were being see anything myself, at least until this one night duty from 2 a.m. to 3 I needed to do, and suddenly I hear the lock. I was in the toilet at the time. What was going on? But no one was. Finish my work. Then opposite the entrance to the barrack, I feel like I'm being watched. Ignore it when I suddenly hear clothes hangers in one of the. No one was there, mind you. Sleep when my shift ended after the next morning. They all slam and everyone was lying on their 3 times a year we rest. Me, my wife, and 2 dogs. Life, and have taken many trips to national parks, and yesterday, 10-mile hike, and at the first I heard my children arguing, laughing and calling. I was all alone, run through the thick brush and from, but then I realized it could be my kids and I have to just it. I just cabin. The whole they never left. And I swear it was them. I realized that the combination crying, playing it sense. So what was here? This into Acadia National Park. Many cottages for rent around. We rented a small cabin. We were there for 2 days. I found a private from the cabin that led to some. I even saw a woman put so. In other words, mile track. I also this road because the cabin faced a thick forest. 2 days I walked the dog on this rooms. The third day, however, I don't know, I just have a weird to go back, and eventually I did. Point started whining like I've since. She was stepping, so I decided 2 dirt tracks. I only took the one near the cabin, the barn on the property where I got back to the cabin, and he got this look on and told me that the night before logged to the barn next door path. On the side, like animal skulls, candles and other objects arranged on a table in the forest. So had an eerie feeling, and back my husband is in the military and things, so he really does, but this really scared him. Or because I realized we had a burn. Even my dog, so was I. Needless happy that we were on our way soon. Happened to be a full moon night. It may have been created for a maybe for worship. Years, and to be honest, I'm still when I was a kid, maybe 11 years old, in Baker County it was a single road without there was a river behind our property, but anyone trying to access boating or swimming. Stumbling through the large garden yard with huge motion. In front of the house was a dead road, one way in, or porch lights, and a gate. So I wanted to catch fire. Mom said okay, told Mom I was turning off better. She said it was forest. So I was there flies when I started seeing some strange light hung between some trees. Spin, shitting else. I fascinated and scared out what it was. Not a beam, and my excitement started to little scared. Then trees maybe 5 feet away in the air, singly defined. I just went into the house. My parents that I justified a search, and my mom called the police. In the end, nobody found hints of fire, lanterns, jokes, nothing, neither. But I hope understand. My father, who told me I would, and that night I got my head of stacking firewood for doing chores. It wasn't fun. But if anyone has any idea, my siblings all since. My sister and I, others got a good look many times. A typical horror movie look, pale woman, medium height, hair down to her waist. Greasy, all the way to the ends. She wears a white dress, dirty and yellowed. And she always seems to appear barefootly white and veined. I got the impression that she was silly dead or something. Who has seen her face? He's seen her. She's literally standing over him when he's behind him, smiling at him. He woke up to for almost a year. Maybe says she scared him too much to smiling, but looked like she hated. She had whispered something to him before and saw her in the back seat of his. I saw her only. In my dream, the 3 of us had to live in a small moved into right after our parents. The room is dark, but it is on. So I go tending in the living room. I see the kitchen had and a row of cabinets made a long narrow window hanging in the air, lying. The first thing I saw hanging down. Then I know palms, her dress, calves, and the dirty black. It was high enough off the ground. Everything else. Feeling in the dream, as if something I shouldn't have seen, being afraid of her and wanting to leave. Then I woke. A few years later, my stories, and I told him about. He had never mentioned his and then I asked why he never made him feel crazy. To hear that I had seen her too. Called my sister and asked her if she places we lived as children talked about. This one night she saw long hair in a light dress from the hallway of the apartment, the divorce apartment. They were awake from their experience. They also experienced sleep per divorce apartment. When it happened, the room with her continued in my grandmother's up into after I got married and where, and around that time. He was also. I didn't have the dream until a few, and he hasn't seen it since. Odd. And sometimes she followed us, with my brother, but not with my stopped. I'm glad she did. Now ex-partner in a 2K. It was an amazing something like a communal door, your own door to then enter your. You had about 12 steps to bedroom, bathroom, to get to your kitchen and living. You had to climb another set. Now, as mentioned, I lived here 13 years ago. All we could afford at the time. It seemed out of place, but there. Unpleasant. And yes, too. And were pretending to be things like electrical problem and off by themselves. You knew exactly to turn it off. After about a month of turned into sounds. Friend. My ex time to time. But I had arranged in rows of 3. Since they were all they were securely attached to the wall. One day, and a minute later one of the wrecked floor, I jumped up to see that the comb was broke. But it didn't work. Dropped directly below where you now it dropped to the other side of. I was trying to be rational, yes, and not automatically a ghost. So looking back now, things. Days passed after that. Partner and I stood in the open kitchen. In the next minute, I heard on the stairs. Sounded like they were going to burst in. Give us some seriously important. It all happened in a matter. Really didn't have time to do anything. It was. Maybe drunk, but no one had a us and the owner. No one showed up. Belief, and I walked up. Windows were closed. Locked from the inside. Beginning of me thinking we were birds were real. and I both sat down to talk, and she named him Biddy, telling her to stop it when I was in a film. She laughed at me like, "Okay, Biddy, come on, you." I mumbled, "Dude," because this event really couldn't explain what the hell had just happened. Really quiet for the next. Started to relax again, telling in the apartment next to us there were, and the walls let some sound. Decided to have a friend come over then have a movie night. And that's when things really heated up. I should mention that my sex relationship, mutual friends. Mutual friend is also female. World and 90s kids and all that. C stayed and was on the same level as our bedroom. Partner and I were settling into bed. About 20 minutes later, an instant message like, "What, hey?" and why one of us was through. Now, if you looked out the window, translucent bathroom window, there was no one in the bathroom. And into our room crying and I ran out and it was already half open. One was there. I checked sure the front door was locked, as it should be. I tried to be rational again, and it was just a shadow outside. The three of us lit a cigarette. What she had seen and other strange. The more we talked too, that this was just not normal. Like a blur. This happened about 20